Welcome to Exploring Santa Cruz, a bi-weekly program on KSQD 90.7 FM. I'm your host, Matilda Rand. My guest is Joe Kenny, and we will discuss our local state parks. Let me introduce my guest. Joe Kenny is the Program and Philanthropy Director at Friends of Santa Cruz State Parks. She gets great joy from helping to develop programs that introduce new visitors to our 34 beautiful local state parks, as well as introducing locals to programs and parks to which they may not be familiar. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you so much.
Let's start with what the Friends of the Santa Cruz State Parks do.
We work collaboratively with state parks, and we raise funds for interpretive programs and educational programs in our local state parks.
That's short and sweet.
Yeah.
And how is that working with the state parks?
It's working fine. We have great folks that work here. We're really lucky, and everyone in all different levels are super dedicated to bringing people into the parks and having them enjoy the parks. That's their goal.
How many parks are there? And specifically, people may want to know who owns them.
There are 280 state parks in the state of California, and as you said earlier, we co-manage 34 of them. Our district runs from South San Francisco all the way to Watsonville, all those state parks along the coast, and then over the mountains to Castle Rock and Portola, and all the other mountain parks in our county. And who owns them are you and me and everyone. These are our parks. Being able to care for our parks is a responsibility of all of us.
Is that why your website says that'smypark.org?
It's very true. I run a number of the programs that people identify with a specific park. They're very clear. My park is Seacliff, or my family took me to Natural Bridges every single summer. And people have a real affinity for those parks.
Tell me a little bit about the programs you oversee.
For the last number of years, we've been working really hard to open the parks to what we call non-traditional park users. And the way we've done that is identify where there are barriers. So one of the programs we run is Kids to Parks, where we raise money to support buses for kids from low-income schools to be able to go on field trips to the parks. Because the schools don't have the money for it, teachers are stretched so thin, and it makes it equal so that everybody gets an opportunity to be introduced to a park. And I have to tell you a quick story. There was a class from Hayward that went to Castle Rock, and this one little girl was going, "This isn't a park, there is no playground. There's no place to climb." And the interpreter said, well, give it a little time, right? And then they got into the rocks, and everybody's climbing through the rocks. And she's like, okay, then I understand. Towards the end of it, she was standing in front of a redwood tree. And she said to the interpreter, "Could you please take a picture with this tree? We don't have trees in my neighborhood. My folks have never seen one."
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
No, I'm not. There are kids living in Santa Cruz County within 2 miles of the beach who have never been to the beach because their families are afraid. They don't know how to swim. Their kids aren't learning how to swim, and they want to keep them safe. So these kids, it's not just one community, it's all these coastal communities where kids never get to go to the beach.
When I was a teacher, I always took my kids that 2 miles from school to the beach, and they had the best of times.
Oh, man.
And yes, they were afraid because in Mexico, most of my kids came from Mexico. There are sharks. And then I took them to swimming pool. We walked from school, Pájaro School. We walked, Dangers Road, Salinas Road, but my kids did perfectly. We walked all the way to the YMCA, and then we swam. And then several kids didn't want to come. Then I took slides, in those days we still had slides, and showed them to the kids. And we talked about the little swimming field trip we had. And this one child raised her hand and she said, "So teacher, there are no sharks in the swimming pool?" It is amazing. We'll get to your interpretation of the park. That is so important. We need to translate nature and what we do in nature to our visitors, but also to our kids. And you do that.
Yeah, and the field trips, there is a virtual part to it. So the teachers get the information, and then there's a time when the kids get to live stream with the interpreter. Because also a lot of children are afraid of people in uniform if their families don't have documentation, right? Mm-hmm. So that just gets in your bones. And so we introduce them to the interpreter. Mm-hmm. This isn't the police, but they are in those beige uniforms. And they meet them beforehand. Then the interpreter meets them at the bus. It's a great way for connecting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is there anything special happening in any of the parks right now?
Most people don't realize that we have our own bloom up here. It's not a super bloom, but right now, Wilder is just going crazy with wildflowers. And the other place that no one expects is Big Basin. Because of the fire, the canopy is less dense, so the sun is getting to the ground, and there's been so much water that there are incredible wildflowers all over Big Basin right now.
Really?
Really, and you can go up there. Yes. You get on our website and make an appointment and schedule it and go up. It's so beautiful.
Unbelievable. Talking about the programs, how do you fund them?
We fund a lot of our programs through individual people. Mm-hmm. They become members of Friends and they make a donation. We fund it through when you go into the park in your car. That's why we really encourage people to not park outside the park, but park inside and pay the $10 because that goes directly to those programs. So you can say, I support Kids to Parks with my $10 and make you feel better. If you go to the parks a lot, it's economical to buy a park pass because it's $125. That's one park visit a month. And if you go to the park more than once a month, you've already paid for it.
And is that per person or is that for the family?
That's for the whole family. Whoever's in the car.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. You could be in a van.
You can be in stretch limousine.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, you may have heard that the Obamas went to Henry Cowell a couple of months ago. They did. It was their anniversary, and they wanted to go for a hike, and they went to Henry Cowell. Nobody recognized them.
That is fantastic.
Isn't it great?
But you pay more than just those programs. You also pay the interpreters, do I understand that?
Yes.
You have employees?
Yeah. We have 100 employees.
Wow.
Most of them are in the parks. Those are the people who take your money at the kiosk. They support the other staff in the parks. As over the years, as state parks got cuts from Sacramento, we've been able to raise the money to fill in. We actually have an incredible group of paid interpreters who are state park employees, and they know their stuff. They're really good. They also train all the docents who are the volunteers. For all of you retired teachers who might be interested in becoming a volunteer in a state park. It's very, very fun. So the money we raise through your park entrance fees, through camping fees, all go to support our staff who directly work with state parks or state parks employees themselves.
I remember several years ago we couldn't go and use the bathrooms at the beaches because of the state cuts. Did you? Do I remember that you did something with that?
It was actually the lifeguards.
The lifeguards.
I think it was 2008. The state was going to close a bunch of state parks, but before that they cut the lifeguards. And Friends did a special fundraising appeal to get lifeguards because we knew people were still going to come to the beach.
We need them.
We need them. So we did that. And we also worked really hard to keep the Mission open because State Parks was going to close the Mission. And we felt it was too valuable. And that's a very old building. It needs to be maintained all the time.
Absolutely.
You know, when you have a building made of mud, you can't just leave it. It takes a lot of maintenance.
I know. Well, let me remind people that they're listening to Exploring Santa Cruz on KSQD. My name is Matilda Rand, and my guest is Joe Kenny. And our topic is our local state parks. We just talked about the big bloom at Big Basin, but what happened to Big Basin a couple of years ago?
Well, as most people will remember, there was a huge fire, and pretty much the whole park got burned. And the whole center part of the park with all the historic buildings were gone. Yeah. So state parks, working with a lot of partners, we were one, but there are many other organizations, reached out to the community and did a public process of imagining what the park would look like.
Oh, really?
Yes. Imagining Big Basin.
Like webinars, workshops?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. From that process, we came up with a plan. And what we've been doing with state parks is from the center of what used to be the center of the park, working on the trails so that every time you go there, there are new trails opening up and it takes you further and further out. There's all these loops. So,
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah. And we're going to expand the number of people who can go to the park. And we're looking at a lot of different ways to get people safely into the park and also preserve the old growth.
And I heard you say a little while ago that people can make an appointment. You cannot just go to Big Basin and pay your money and go in.
It is by appointment right now, unless you ride your bike or walk in.
Oh.
Yeah, because there's only so much room for cars.
Of course.
Further down the road, we're going to have buses. So you park at one place and you get on a bus and that takes you into the park. And that will give us more room so that more people can go.
And especially if you're expanding the trails, then indeed you can handle more people.
Yeah. And there are interpreters up there, so they can tell you what's going on and what you're looking at and what is that flower? I've never seen that flower before.
After the fire, what kind of regrowth was there?
Well, it's amazing because the Douglas fir, a lot of them died and had to be taken out. Oh. But we were able, thanks to the staff at state parks, we were able to save a lot of old growth redwoods that are still there. They are very skinny. Looks like fuzz to me. And I know what it will look like because some of the trees in my neighborhood burned a while ago. So you see it. But it's all coming back. They weren't dead, which is just amazing. And there's little sprouts everywhere. Little sprouts of redwoods coming up all over.
It's going to take a while.
It will take a while. We won't ever see it the way it used to be. Maybe 3 or 4 generations down the road, it'll be a little bit more grown.
So you called it Reimagining
Big Basin.
I recently went to Seacliff Parks and saw the devastation.
Yeah.
I did not watch because I couldn't stand it, the taking down of the pier, but I saw all of those campsites that I always walk by, go to the wall and walk back. It was a great wall. And are you going to do something like that, a Reimagine Seacliff?
There is going to be a Reimagining Seacliff process, and it will be open to the communities. People should stay tuned. I am sure you're going to get a bunch of PSAs here that your staff will be reading, inviting people to do online stuff, do in-person stuff, and really think about how we can rebuild that park so that it will be climate resilient. That's the idea, is you don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again and having it keep getting destroyed.
Right.
So how do we have a coastal park that has campsites that are accessible to regular people? There were 60 campsites there, and they were full 100% of the time.
Yeah.
It's important that people have access to camping at the beach. So that's what we're hoping. That's what we're looking at.
So you mentioned about places to camp. I know they're gone right now. Same thing with Big Basin. Was that part of your funding, the campsites?
Big part of our funding.
Ooh.
A big part. Seacliff and Big Basin were 2 of the biggest parks with camping.
Right.
And a lot of that income stayed in Santa Cruz County. It didn't go to Sacramento. So we're looking at a pretty big hole in our budget right now. And that's why we're really encouraging people to identify what they love about state parks and support it financially if they can. And they can go to our website, that'smypark.org.
Yeah. I assume, having you sit here, that you're not just saying, well, come, we need those campgrounds back because it brings in money. You have another reason why you want those campsites.
Because there are so few places that working class people can come to in Santa Cruz County and have a wonderful experience. Not everybody can stay at the hotels. And I have had 3 different jobs up on that cliff, not involved with state parks. And I saw those campers coming in day after day after day for years who can afford to take a vacation on the California coast unless it's something at a state park, really.
I think only those of us who live here can take a vacation. That's why I go to the ocean. Just feels like a vacation, going to the ocean.
It does.
Seeing the sunset, seeing the people on the beach playing volleyball, making all kinds of structures from driftwood and all that. And don't forget, of course, sometimes those dolphins coming by and maybe some whales. And it is just a fun place to live. So I can imagine that you say one of our jobs is to make sure that people of lower income have a place to stay and enjoy what we are enjoying.
That's right.
I hear you. So we mentioned Big Basin and Sea Cliff being damaged by the fire and the floods. Any other parks got damaged?
A lot of other parks got damaged.
Really?
Yeah. And they weren't to the level of Sea Cliff and Big Basin, but things are still being cleaned up. And like everyone else, there's a staff shortage coming out of COVID. So if you go to state parks here, please thank the volunteers and staff that you see, because they work really hard over and above. And a lot of them live at the park, so they're on call 24/7. There were 1,000 people in Big Basin when that fire hit.
Oops.
And a lot of staff lived up there, and they cleared those people out in hours.
Wow.
They got them all out of the park. State Parks doesn't brag about that. I think it's a phenomenal feat. No one got hurt. Everyone got out safely.
Does it mean you have drills like we have in schools?
The staff does.
Yeah.
We don't. I mean, the regular people don't.
Listeners, by now you probably want to get a hold of Joe and the Friends of Santa Cruz State Parks. We mentioned the website, that'smypark.org. And so logically, the email address for Joe is joe@that'smypark.org. And the phone number of the office is 831-429-1840, which of course you can also find when you go to the website. The address of the Friends of the Santa Cruz State Parks is 1543 Pacific Avenue, Suite 206, Santa Cruz 9506. So, which of course is also on the website called that'smypark.org. So we have some more time to make sure we cover this, because you mentioned about support, financial support, but people can also get involved in other ways.
That's right.
Besides Reimagine Sea Cliff Parks and Reimagine Big Basin. Tell us, how can people get involved?
People can volunteer for all different kinds of things. They can volunteer for cleanup, they can volunteer for events that we have, or they can volunteer specifically with state parks at a particular park and kind of get lodged into that park. People stay for years and years and years. If you're interested in volunteering with us or state parks, the person you should reach is Lauren, Lauren, at that'smypark.org. And Lauren Kitayama is our outreach coordinator, and she is working really hard to bring people into the parks, people who don't think of themselves as park people.
It sounds to me, the way you're describing it, that you're actually building community.
I think
those
so.
Volunteers. I mean, that's one of the things that we do at we think we do at K-Squid, is we build community in many different ways.
Yes.
You're building community.
It's true. It's true. And we've come out of a time where people have been really isolated. And if you find yourself in that position and you're sitting at home, maybe you go out for a walk, but you don't do very much, go online. Look at what the opportunities are and make a phone call. Call me at the office. My extension is 312.
Okay, now we got everything about you. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, the other thing I did want to mention is many people in Mid-County have been waiting for the stairs at Manresa.
I walked those.
Well, the stairs at Manresa are in the process of being fixed.
Oh, good.
The state has all these priorities, so it takes a while for things. But we got money from the state, and they've done all of the engineers and done all that stuff.
All the geological studies.
Yes. So now there will be another way to get to the beach from Manresa. Walk down those stairs.
I know. Are those the stairs by Seacliff or another one?
It's not by Seacliff. It's another one further down.
Because the stairs by Seacliff were also closed, right?
I think they've opened them up.
Okay, good. So I can go back. Because, I love to go with my friend to any kind of park. And so on Sundays we used to, and there were people there that walked those stairs up and down, up and down, up and down, 30, 40 times. And then we get to know some of those people. It's so interesting. It is like a religion. And it's Sunday, of course. So it's like a religion to them to walk it up and down. And it's so healthy. There's so many things in the park you can do to stay and get healthy, right?
Yeah.
Now let's talk about how being in the park is good for our health. Touching a tree, the old saying of hugging a tree.
Yeah.
I mean, there actually is something to it, right?
Yes, there is definitely hard science that shows when you are in nature, it changes your mood. It makes you healthier. And you don't have to do anything. You don't have to go to the beach and walk on the beach and go up and down or go hiking. Just being under the trees, in an open field, by the ocean. Literally, there are ions that come into you. They call them positive ions, right? For a good reason. Has anybody gone to the beach, walked along, and then stayed in a bad mood? Not very often. Yeah, there's hard science that it is so much better for your health to take a walk in nature than just in your neighborhood. And nature can be found everywhere. As long as you've got something, tree,
except for
water.
that child that you were talking about.
Right, there are no trees in my...
Take a picture because there's no trees. Can you imagine that?
No, I actually can. And growing up, I thought going into nature was going to like a park that was manicured. I'd never been to a wild place. And the first time I went to a wild place, I was in my 20s, and I was blown away. And then when I came here to California and drove up the coast, past all the artichoke fields on the back of a pickup truck in 1974, I literally thought I had died and gone to heaven. And I was just like, people really live here? This is amazing. Yeah.
And then you stayed.
And then I stayed.
And now you work for the parks.
And now I work for the parks. I'm so lucky.
Any final thoughts? We have a minute.
If you like what you see when you go to the park, please thank people, support the parks. We need your help. We really do. We have to do this together. Like we were just saying, we live in an incredibly beautiful place. And a lot of people don't know that Lighthouse Field and Wilder Ranch and some of the beaches up north were all saved from development. Community organizers did that. So our job is to continue that and keep them looking good.
Because it gives us back our health and our enjoyment.
That's right.
And our entertainment and our education. Oh, so wonderful. Listeners, this was Exploring Santa Cruz with Joe Kenny, Program and Philanthropy Director of the Friends of Santa Cruz State Parks. Thank you so much, Joe. This was enlightening.
Oh, thank you, Matilda. I love your program. Thank you for doing this. And because you, too, are a volunteer.
I am, and we're building community.
building community.